For further analysis, we are joined from Paris by Director of the EU ASEAN Centre and former World Bank advisor, Mr. Meher Nicolas Ferzelli. Good evening to you, sir, and welcome to Qnews Economic Bulletin. Let me start by asking you, Germany's economy contracted by 0.3% in the second quarter of 2025, with industrial production underperforming expectations. Now, what factors do you believe are driving this slowdown, and how might this impact the broader Eurozone economy?
I'm delighted to join you today. I think, we should not read too much from these figures. I mean, to make a very long and complicated story short, the figures are bad. So they're not dramatically bad, they're not horrible, it's not the end of the world for Germany, but they're bad. Because they show a contraction. So I think, year on, they show minus 0.3% contraction. I think the consensus, so before the data were published earlier today in Berlin, I think the consensus was flat. So most experts believed that compared to 1 year ago, it would be 0.0, completely flat, and it's minus 0.3%. So what I'm coming at, we have to give the data, most likely negative data, give them 2 or 3 more months to build a full judgment. But investors, especially investors in the stock exchange, they are very nervous, they're anxious for many reasons, beyond the slowdown of the German economy and President Trump's trade war, etc. So there are many reasons why investors are quite anxious the world over. So any hint of a bad news can be overinterpreted. So once again, what do the data tell us? That the German economy is shrinking across sectors. So it's not only industry or export oriented, because you would think that what Trump is doing or the new trade war is impacting essentially export oriented industry, which in the case of Germany would be heavy industrial equipment, machine tools, expensive cars. It's not only that, it's also the domestic consumption, domestic services, hotel industry, tourism, all that is quite bad. So to make a long story short, it is negative, but it could be worse in the coming quarters.
Right. Despite the GDP contraction, Germany has significantly reduced its government deficit in the first half of 2025 due to faster revenue growth compared to spending. Now, how sustainable or how significant is this fiscal improvement with regard to the current economic challenges?
Germany doesn't need that recent fiscal improvement. Why? Just like Switzerland, just like Holland or Luxembourg, Germany can bite the bullet. Why do I mean bite the bullet? Because their overall national government debt to GDP ratio is very low, like 40, 50%. Countries like Italy or France, their national government debt to GDP ratio is 130%, right? So it gives you a sense of the financial strength and stability of Germany. Their house is in order, just like the Swiss government house is in very good order. So when there is a shock, when there is a global shock, when there is a Trump trade war, etc., Ukraine war, when your house is solid in order, it can withstand is already so high. The governments in Paris and Rome, they have no room for maneuver. They have no fiscal, macroeconomic room for maneuver. The Germans, they have a good room for maneuver. So what I'm coming at is, that short-term improvement is good, but it's not something that will move the boat. The boat is very solid. So from that perspective, if there is a big crisis, which is very possible, if there's a big economic crisis in Europe in the coming quarters and semesters, the German government, if they want to intervene to jumpstart the economic engine, how? By spending. If the German government decides to spend a lot of money on public infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, energy and military infrastructure, which they will probably do more in the coming quarters. They can afford to do that, which is great for them. So if the economy really slows down, the government can pump up a lot of money by government spending into the system to make up for that slowdown in the private sector.
Right, but Mr. Fazeli, how would Germany's recent economic performance reflect or influence the European Central Bank's monetary policy decisions, particularly concerning interest rates and inflation control? And how would that reflect on Europe's economy at large?
So from the other side, right? So if you are anxious about interest rates, it's positive news because, when the economy slows down, and Germany is a big part of the Eurozone mainland European economy, a very big part. So if the German economy slows down and inflation is low, which is the case, inflation is very low in Germany today, then it gives an argument for the European Central Bank, which by the way is based in Frankfurt, also in Germany. It gives an argument for the ECB to lower a little bit further the rates. So if you're cynical, if you're a financial investor, very cynically and coldly, if you look only at your own interest as a financial investor, it's good news. In a way, in a certain way, within limits, it's good news because it increases a little bit the likelihood of the European Central Bank to decrease interest rates.
But we're speaking here about the monetary policies and the monetary, what could be the upcoming monetary choices or decisions. But how about the European economy at large?
Yeah, one man's bad news is another man's good news. So if you are Italy or France, you are desperate for the European Central Bank to keep interest rate low or even lower them a little bit further. So the fact that the German economy is slowing down, but inflation is contained, next time the board of the ECB meets, right? Many board members are German or pro-German, let's say. It's, the Bundesbank, right? The Bundesbank, German central banking philosophy, very cautious, very conservative. So these guys, when they meet with their Italian and French colleagues next month, the French and the Italians and the Spaniards, they will have more arguments to tell the Germans, let's keep interest rates low, right? That's one thing. Another thing I want to say is there's a very interesting indicator which is often overlooked, is that the performance of national stock exchanges, right? People make that mistake, especially in America or Asia or the Middle East. They tend to believe that all European stocks, all European shares, they move in sync, right? They think that, when French shares rise, German shares rise, etc. It's only partly true, And in times of crisis or in times of anxiety and stress, it is not true at all. And this year has been a year of anxiety and stress. So this year, the performance of the German stock exchange is very different from the performance of the Spanish, Italian, and French.
So you're saying here that bad news for some would be good news for others.
Yes.
But not for the bloc.
Paradox. Yes.
But not for the bloc.
Yes, absolutely. But another paradox, another bizarre thing, is that even though the German economy's performance this year is quite bad, mediocre, verging on bad, the performance of the German stock exchange is excellent this year, one of the best in the world, surprisingly, and that's, the 30 index is up 22%.
Yes, clear what you're saying here. However, my time is up and I have to end it here. Mr. Nicolas Fazeli from Paris, Director of the EU ASEAN Centre and former World Bank Advisor. We thank you so much for your insights.